Good evening. You are safe, and you are here. Tonight, I invite you to leave behind the weight of the day and step gently into a slower world. A world where time drifts like soft clouds, where silence is warm and friendly, and where stories bloom like flowers in a hidden garden. This tale is not meant to excite you or keep you awake, it is meant to soothe you, like the hush of leaves in a gentle wind, or the quiet crackle of firewood in an old hearth. So, breathe deeply, find a comfortable place, and allow your body to rest. We begin with a story of a secret place, tucked away in walls of stone, where silence is never empty, and where friendship and patience bring even the sleeping earth back to life. This is the story of the secret garden. Once, long ago, in a great, sprawling house built of weathered gray stone, there lived a little girl. Her name was Mary. The house was old, vast, and filled with long corridors that whispered with echoes. It stood upon the edge of the moors, wide, open stretches of grass and heather, where the wind never seemed to rest. Mary was not like other children. She was often quiet, sometimes stern, and had lived most of her young life far from the green countryside. Her parents had lived in faraway India, in a house of heat and brightness, but life had changed suddenly for Mary. And now, she was sent to England, to the home of her uncle, a man who kept mostly to himself, in a mansion known as Misselthwaite Manor. The manor seemed lonely at first. Its gardens were wild, its walls covered in creeping ivy, and its many rooms carried the faint scent of wood polish and age. Yet, as days passed slowly, Mary found herself wandering the grounds. She walked along gravel paths, through archways, and past fountains long forgotten. She listened to the sound of crows in the trees, to the rustle of rabbits hiding in hedges, and to the soft patter of rain against stone windowsills. One morning, as the mist hung low across the moor, Mary overheard a soft whisper from one of the servants, a whisper of a garden that had been locked for 10 years. A garden no one had entered, and no one spoke of aloud. This secret, like a quiet ember in her heart, stirred Mary's curiosity. And so, she began to search. Mary wandered among old walls, where ivy curled like fingers, where roses had once bloomed but now lay tangled and forgotten. She traced her hands over heavy iron locks, wondering what might be behind them. She asked, though few would answer. Most turned away, muttering only that the master had locked it after a great sorrow, and that no one dared to open it again. Yet secrets, as you may know, have a way of calling to those who listen carefully. And soon, Mary discovered the key, a heavy, cold piece of iron, found by chance beneath the roots of an old tree, glinting faintly in the soil. With it, her heart beat gently, not fast, for this was not the excitement of adventure, but the quiet trembling of possibility. And when at last she found the hidden door, half swallowed by ivy and branches, she slipped the key into its rusted lock. The hinges groaned softly as the door creaked open, revealing a forgotten world. Inside was silence, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of sleep. Roses curled in heavy knots along stone arches. Grasses, tall and swaying, grew wild where once paths had been laid. A fountain stood still, its water long since dried, but its shape elegant as ever. Branches, twisted and tangled, reached upward, as though yearning for the sky. It was a garden, sleeping. Waiting. Breathing softly beneath the weight of years. And in that moment, Mary felt something new, something gentle, something patient, something like hope. Each morning at Misselthwaite Manor began the same way. The halls echoed faintly with the sound of footsteps as servants went about their quiet work. Fires were lit in the great rooms, sending gentle waves of warmth into the cold stone walls. And outside, the moor stretched endlessly, with a wind that seemed to sing softly across the grasses. Mary often awoke early, long before breakfast. She liked the hush of those hours, when the world had not yet begun to stir. After discovering the hidden garden, those mornings became something else entirely. Now, she would slip away, carrying her small hands in her pockets, and walk through the damp grass until she reached the ivy-covered wall. Each time, the key felt heavy and secret in her palm. She turned it slowly, as though not to wake the house, and stepped inside. The garden was always waiting. Silent. Patient. But not unfriendly. Mary began by simply looking. She would walk the narrow paths, where weeds had taken root, and pause to study the roses. Though tangled and brown with age, she noticed tiny signs of life, small buds, tightly curled, hidden beneath layers of thorny branches. The grass was thick, but between the blades, she could see patches of soil that seemed still fertile, dark and rich. She bent down one morning, her fingers brushing the earth. It was cool, damp, and soft, as though it had been longing for a gentle touch. And so, with no training and no plan, Mary began. She plucked away weeds, her small hands tugging carefully, and uncovered the soil beneath. At first, the work was slow, her hands becoming dirty, her knees damp with dew. But with each day, it felt less like work and more like conversation, as though she and the garden were speaking in a quiet language no one else could hear. The days passed gently. Sometimes the air was filled with birdsong, sometimes with nothing but the hush of wind. Mary began to notice tiny changes. Where she had cleared weeds, green shoots appeared, small and delicate. The roses, once hidden under dead branches, seemed to stretch a little toward the light. The garden was waking. Slowly, tenderly. And with it, something inside Mary also stirred. For she, too, had been quiet and closed off, much like the sleeping roses. She had not been used to warmth or kindness. But here, in this hidden place, the garden seemed to welcome her, just as she welcomed it. One morning, as Mary worked among the flower beds, she heard a soft sound behind her. A rustle in the grass, and then the cheerful hop of small feet. She turned to see a robin, bright and lively, perched on a low branch. Its head tilted curiously, as though it were watching her with kind eyes. Mary smiled, a small and rare smile. The robin chirped softly, not startled, not afraid, but almost as though it were greeting her. From then on, the robin became her companion. Wherever she worked, it was never far, fluttering from branch to branch, sometimes pausing on the old fountain, sometimes darting to the wall. Its song filled the air with a gentle music, and Mary felt less alone. Not long after, she met someone else. One afternoon, while walking along the outer grounds, she noticed a boy leaning against a gate, watching her quietly. His clothes were simple, his hair untidy, and his hands carried the rough marks of someone who worked often outdoors. This was Dickon, the brother of one of the maids in the house. Unlike Mary, he seemed at home with the land, as though the earth, the animals, and the air itself belonged to him and he to them. When Mary mentioned the garden, his eyes lit with quiet wonder. He did not ask too many questions, nor did he speak loudly. Instead, he listened carefully, as though he already understood what such a place might mean. Soon, Dickon began to join her. Together, they tended the soil, cleared branches, and whispered about the plants they hoped to see bloom again. Dickon would sometimes bring little tools, or seeds wrapped carefully in cloth, or even gentle creatures from the moor, a fox cub, a lamb, or a bird that perched on his shoulder. With him, the garden felt less like a secret kept and more like a secret shared. Mary, who had once been lonely, began to feel something she had not known before. She felt companionship, quiet and steady, like sunlight warming a stone wall. The garden was no longer silent. It was alive, with rustling leaves, with soft voices, with laughter that was not loud, but carried like music through the branches. And as Mary watched the first rosebuds begin to open, she realized that perhaps beauty does not disappear when forgotten. It only sleeps, waiting for someone to notice, to care, to be patient enough to wake it again. The days grew longer. Spring, soft and slow, began to touch the air around Misselthwaite Manor. The winds across the moor were still cool, but not unfriendly now. They carried with them the faint scent of heather, of grass pushing up through the soil, and of distant rain. Mary and Dickon spent more and more time within the walls of the secret garden. Each morning, they would step inside, and it seemed a little brighter than before. More roses were waking, buds stretching toward the sun. The ground, once tangled with weeds, now held neat patches of cleared soil, dotted with shoots that promised blooms to come. Sometimes Dickon would kneel close to the earth and whisper, almost as though speaking directly to the plants. "They're like folk, these flowers," he told Mary in his quiet Yorkshire voice. "They need company, and a bit of kind talk, same as us." Mary listened, and though she did not always understand, she believed him. For the plants did seem to respond. Leaves unfurled with quiet determination. Petals opened slowly, like secrets unfolding. The garden, once silent, now breathed with life. But still, there was another presence in the house, one Mary had only heard in whispers. In a quiet corner of Misselthwaite Manor, in a room heavy with curtains and silence, lived a boy named Colin. He was Mary's cousin, though she had not known it when she first arrived. Colin had been ill for much of his life. He seldom left his bed, convinced that weakness would never let him walk freely, and that his days would always be heavy with stillness. Servants spoke of him only in hushed voices, and the house seemed to carry the weight of his seclusion. Yet one night, as the wind pressed against the windows, Mary heard a sound in the distance, a cry, faint but real. Guided by curiosity, she followed the sound through shadowed corridors until she reached a hidden room. And there she found Colin, pale and fragile, propped against pillows, his eyes filled with both weariness and wonder. He looked at her with surprise, for he was not used to visitors. Mary, never one to shy away from honesty, spoke plainly. She told him of the garden. She described the roses, the shoots, the robin who sang in the morning. She spoke of the air, fresh and gentle, and of Dickon, who seemed able to charm even the smallest creatures. At first, Colin listened with disbelief, for the world she painted seemed far from the walls he knew. Yet as she spoke, something in his expression softened. The very next day, Mary returned, and so did Colin's questions. Slowly, like a door opening, he allowed himself to imagine what such a place might be like. And soon, he asked the words she had been hoping for. "Will you take me there?" And so it was decided. One clear afternoon, with the sun warm but not harsh, Dickon brought a small wheelchair. With gentle care, they wheeled Colin through the garden paths, the robin darting playfully overhead as though guiding the way. When at last they reached the hidden door, Mary slipped the key into the lock and pushed it open wide. Together, they wheeled him inside. For a long moment, Colin said nothing. His eyes moved across the arches of roses, the fountain, the sunlight falling like gold upon the earth. He breathed the air, filled with the scent of growing things. And slowly, his lips curved into a smile, not wide, but real. "It feels alive," he whispered. And indeed, it was. From that day, the garden belonged to all three of them. Mary, once stern and quiet, had softened with care. Dickon, steady and gentle, brought laughter and skill. And Colin, once hidden and frail, began to change in the garden's embrace. Each day they returned, Colin sitting among the flowers, breathing the fresh air, listening to the birdsong. He began to stand, supported first by Dickon, then by his own strength. With each step, he grew more certain, more alive. The garden had given him not just beauty, but courage. It had given him the gift of hope. And so, the days passed quietly, peacefully, as the secret garden blossomed. Roses climbed higher, branches bent with bloom, and sunlight lingered longer on the stone walls. The garden, once a forgotten place of silence, had become a sanctuary, not only for the flowers, but for the children themselves. The weeks slipped quietly into months. Where once the garden had been hushed and overgrown, it now brimmed with color and song. Roses stretched high along stone arches, their petals open like cups of soft light. Clusters of wildflowers painted the ground with shades of blue, yellow, and violet. The fountain, once dry, now caught the spring rains, its shallow bowl glistening in the sun. The robin still fluttered from branch to branch, sometimes joined by other birds whose music filled the air like a gentle choir. Bees hummed softly over blossoms, and butterflies floated lazily in the golden warmth. Everywhere there was life, steady, calm, and unhurried. Mary, Dickon, and Colin spent nearly every day within the walls of this hidden sanctuary. For them, time seemed different there. Hours passed slowly, without notice, as though the garden itself cradled them in its rhythm. Colin grew stronger with each passing week. At first, he leaned on Dickon's arm to walk a few careful steps. Then, as the days grew brighter, he stood taller, his legs steady beneath him. His laughter, once rare and uncertain, now came freely, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Mary, too, was changed. She no longer wandered alone with her head bowed. She carried with her a softness that came from caring, from nurturing life. Her once stern face now carried a gentle glow. And Dickon, always patient, remained the steady heart of their trio, guiding, tending, and reminding them with his quiet words that all living things, great and small, thrive when shown kindness. The secret garden had become more than a hidden place. It was a home of the spirit, a world apart, where sorrow loosened its hold and joy grew naturally, like vines upon a warm wall. The three children would sit together in the shade of the climbing roses, speaking softly, or simply resting in silence, listening to the hum of life around them. At times, they imagined the garden itself was listening too, breathing gently with them, holding their secrets safe. And always, as the sun set and the light grew golden, they felt a stillness that was not empty but full of warmth, of trust, of gentle promise. Now, dear listener, you may let your eyes grow heavy as the tale begins to fade into quiet. Imagine the garden at twilight, the air cool and sweet, the sky painted in shades of pink and lavender. The stone walls, once lonely, now cradle a world alive with blossoms. The children's voices are soft, drifting like lullabies through the branches. The robin sings one last note before settling for the night. The flowers close their petals, the leaves rest, and the garden, though alive, prepares to sleep. So too, may you rest. Like the garden, your breath can slow, gentle, steady. You are safe, as the world softens into night. Let the stillness of the secret garden carry you, until dreams open like flowers in your own hidden sanctuary. Sleep deeply, and sleep well.